Hello, I'm Kieran Lynch and welcome to OviCast, the Teagasc Sheep podcast. Each episode will bring you latest insights, advice and technical updates for the sheep industry. Now, with many farmers in the middle of lambing, this week's episode is going to focus on managing artificially reared lambs. And to discuss this in more detail, I'm joined by Michael Gottstein, Head of Sheep in Teagasc. Michael outlines the various systems that are available for rearing artificial lambs and the importance of getting them systems set up early and getting lambs onto those feeders early in life. As it can be a costly system, mainly due to the milk replacer input, we discussed the importance of grouping up lambs in weekly batches. This helps facilitate the transition to cold milk, the introduction of concentrated roughage into that diet, with Michael outlining a number of practical tips that can help prepare those lambs for weaning. We finish up with Michael outlining the target inputs for the system and the costs involved. We start off, however, with Michael highlighting the need to have a system in place to deal with orphan or pet lambs on farms this spring.
Every sheep farmer, no matter how big a sheep farm you have and what your litter size is, will have some orphan or what we call sometimes pet lambs. These are basically lambs that for various different reasons, don't have a mom to suckle from. Either the ewe died, the ewe hadn't enough milk, or there was too many lambs there. So how we deal with those, I suppose, is, a big part of the labour associated with sheep farming. And I suppose also there's performance aspects to it. And really, I think, there's various different systems for feeding lambs, everything from just a bottle and a teat, and that's obviously a very labor-intensive system where you have to basically fill and warm up that bottle and feed the lamb, 4 times a day. And if you have multiple lambs, obviously your workload multiplies accordingly. We also have various different types of buckets with nipples off them. So you have buckets with maybe 3 on either side, or buckets that hang off a gate with 3, 4 or 5 nipples, and the lambs can go up. You just fill the bucket and your 3, 4 or 5 lambs stand around the bucket and suck. Again, obviously, milk has to be made up, brought out, and it has to be done every time that the lambs are being fed. Somebody is involved in feeding that. Then I suppose we have the automatic feeders, and I suppose the thing about automatic feeders is that the beauty about the automatic feeding system is that we don't need to do that every day, every time the lambs are being fed. So this is a system where basically every time the lamb wants to drink, there's a teat there and there's milk behind it. And the farmer's job then is really just basically cleaning out that one and refilling it once or twice a day. There's various different type of automatic feeders, everything from just a simple bucket with a number of teats on it, all the way up to really automated systems which are plumbed in, have their own heating system, and mix the milk and the powder automatically. So there's anything from kind of, I'd say, somewhere around €300 all the way up to ones that cost thousands of euros, from ones that can feed anything from 3 or 4 lambs all the way up to ones that can feed hundreds of lambs. And I suppose the thing is that every sheep farmer should have one of these, automated systems for managing these lambs. Even if you're selling pet lambs, some people will say, okay, don't keep them, I sell them. But even when you're selling your lambs as pet lambs, you're going to have them on farm for a number of days, waiting for them to get strong enough to be sold, and waiting for buyers to come and collect them. And these feeders need to really be set up at the start of lambing. Even before lambing starts, have a pen, have your feeder set up, and a power supply there, your milk replacer in place, and basically, so once your ewes are lambing, lamb stays with the mom for 24 hours. That's the length of time it needs to stay there to get the colostrum. And then usually I would recommend every morning the lambs are taken up, the surplus lambs that are 24 hours old or older, and then they're put into the pet lamb pen. Different color mark every day. So we start on, say, Tuesday, put a blue mark on them, Wednesday, yellow mark, Thursday, green mark, whatever. And it's very easy then to monitor the performance of those lambs, make sure that they're all sucking, identify a lamb that's only been put in there yesterday, but isn't maybe getting on, needs an extra bit of help.
And Michael, the success of that system really is dependent on getting it set up right at the start, particularly if we're going to try and keep the costs of it down. You mentioned there about culling them on different days. How important is it getting that group set up early, and maybe more so as we progress and transition on, that we can take them off milk?
Yeah, so very important. I suppose it's important, first of all, Kieran, that we take the lambs off the ewes at kind of 24 hours of age. If you leave them on for 3 or 4 days, it becomes very, very difficult to get them onto the artificial milk, and it creates a lot of workload at that end. So often people say, "Oh, I leave them on there for another day or two. I might get a ewe to foster on or something like that." And next thing you've got a lamb there, he's 3 or 4 days on ewe's milk. Very hard to get, much harder to get him adjusted onto a feeder. So what I would say is get them off early. And if the feeder is there and set up, the reason for marking them, I suppose, by day is that we check them. A lot of these lambs will need to be held up to the feeder maybe once. Most of them will figure it out after that. They'll see the other lambs in the pen drinking, and they'll twig it. There'll be the odd lamb that doesn't twig it, and you'll spot that lamb, and having the colour on the lamb indicates to you how long he's in that pen. If it's a lamb that's only been put in there today, obviously it needs a bit more attention, and you can watch for that. Once we kind of have a week's supply of lambs, it's really important then, Kieran, that they're moved on as a batch. And the importance of that really comes to do with how we manage lambs as they get older. Really what we're trying to do is have them in kind of week batch sizes. So that we'll say last week's batch are moved on into the next pen, and a lot of the feeders will facilitate that you can replace nipples on the side of it with maybe a tube, or some of them have tubes. So having a longer tube going to the next pen allows you to maybe cool the milk down a little bit. If the pen is right next door and you don't have that length for the tube to cool down, maybe running it through a bucket of cold water to cool it down for the older lambs. So as when we start the lambs off on these feeders, here we're giving them really warm milk. We're trying to mimic as much as we can what's happening with the ewe. So the milk temperature will be at the highest setting, and generally that's somewhere around kind of probably 28 to 30 degrees, depending on the system and the feeder you have. That encourages intake, stimulates the lambs to drink as much as they can to appetite. Then I suppose once the lambs are kind of about 10 days old, we try to reduce the temperature somewhat. We're trying to get them accustomed to drinking colder milk. That's going to help us to limit our intake. So from 10 days of age until about 20 days of age, we turn the feeder down, the temperature, down to the bottom setting. Usually that's somewhere around 18 to 20, 21 degrees on most of these feeders. So now they're getting milk that's a good bit cooler than they would be getting from the ewes, or that they were getting in the first 10 days. Then when they're about 3 weeks of age, Kieran, or batches of lambs, we'll move them on again. And at that stage, we're putting them onto cold milk. So this is, environmental temperature milk. So it's water out of the tap, mixed with the milk powder, put into a feeder. There's no warm water added. What we're doing at that stage really is we're trying to get them weaned into the weaning idea. So we're trying to reduce milk intake. We're trying to encourage concentrate intake. So at that stage, really from about 10 days, 2 weeks of age, we'll be introducing a little bit of concentrates. They won't be eating much at that stage. Once we start cooling down the milk, that limits their intake. They'll start nibbling at concentrates. They'll start nibbling at a little bit of roughage, straw, hay, or silage if it's available, clean silage. If there's other stock being fed and you can take a little bit off, that'll be fine as well. And we also start introducing water to them at that stage as well, drinking water. Not that they're going to drink an awful lot of it. As long as they have kind of 2.5 liters of milk per day, they probably won't drink any water or very little, but it's still important to have it there once they start eating the meal. I suppose the benefit of going on to the cold milk, Kieran, is that number one, it limits intake. So we're generally kind of looking at about 400 grams of milk powder per day per lamb for that last kind of 2-week period. Number two, it stops them from gorging themselves, so it prevents bloat, which is a problem with lambs that are bottle fed or fed on some of the other systems, that we start losing lambs with bloat at that stage. And the third thing it does then is it encourages them to start eating meal, and we need to get them onto the meal so that we can wean them at 5 weeks of age. And that's really, really important. So our milk replacer costs about €3 odd, a little bit with it, depending on the type of product you're buying. Maybe $3.10, $3.15, $3.20 per kilo. Our target intake for these lambs is about 13 kilos of milk replacer. It's costing around €40. Obviously, depends on the pack sizes you buy, the quantity you buy. If you buy it all in 5 kilo buckets or 5 kilo bags, it's much more expensive than if you buy big bags. Sometimes if you buy, 10 big bags or whatever, there's a deal there that you might get one free or something like that. So obviously there's lots of different prices out there. But generally I'd be saying around a little bit over €3 a kilo, 13 kilos per lamb, €40 is our budget for the milk replacer. If we have the lambs on it any longer than 5 weeks, we're going to blow that budget out of the water.
That is the big cost in our system, Michael, particularly as that lamb gets older and he's drinking more milk. As you indicated earlier, the performance will be good, but the cost does start stacking up very, very quick.
Yeah, so if they drink a lot more milk, they will grow like the clappers, but it'll be very difficult for you to regain that. And we've seen very often where farmers maybe don't batch up these lambs, Kieran, where they leave them all together and they have kept in the more milk. And now instead of the lamb drinking, 300 or 400 grams a day, they're drinking 600 grams of milk replacer a day. And very quickly then your costs go from €40 to €60 or €70 of milk replacer per lamb, and obviously that's not economical. So while we have very, very good performance, and the lambs will wean, quite heavy, maybe 25, 26, 27 kilograms when they are weaned live weight, it just, we'll have so much money put into them at that stage in terms of milk that it just, the economics goes out the window. So onto the meal, start introducing the meal. Once they're eating 250 grams a day, on 3 consecutive days per head per day. So if you have a batch of lambs, 10 lambs inside in a pen, if they are eating 2.5 kilos, which is 250 grams for the 10 lambs per day, every day on 3 consecutive days, pull the milk. Once they're 5 weeks of age, at least 9 kilograms live weight, pull the milk. They're eating enough meal. They will then very quickly increase the amount of meal they're eating, and they'll stay going on the meal and a bit of hay and silage then at that stage. Just another one there. Look at if you have adult sheep knocking around the place, if they can share a water truck with those lambs, that's useful in terms of seeding their rumen in terms of the bacteria from the saliva from the sheep. So sometimes people will just take buckets of water that sheep have drank out of in the lambing pens that are clean and give the pet lambs access to that. Or if there's a shared drinker, that's also useful in terms of getting their rumen developed.
You get them off to a good start early. Michael's setup was obviously key with that. Certainly a timely bit of information. Thanks very much for that today.
No bother, Kieran. Thank you.
So we're going to leave the episode there at this point. As Michael has indicated, having a system in place to deal with orphan or pet lambs on farms is necessary. It is a costly system, but having that set up right, transitioning lambs off that diet early in life is key to keeping those costs down. It's about following in practical steps that Michael outlined. That's it for me for this episode. Again, for any updates from our sheep program, keep an eye on our Twitter page at Teagasc Sheep. I'm Kieran Lynch. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe and listen in to any of our episodes.